Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me this afternoon for this webinar on branding. My name is Nathan. I'm the marketing manager here at the Booktick Group. I have almost 20 years experience in marketing, both in online and offline channels, working with clients such as Rightmove, Aviva, Mazda, Marks & Spencer's and others. I want to talk to you today about some simple tips to help improve your company look and feel, small changes you can make to help improve your communications and make them more consistent. The best way to manage this process is through a set of brand guidelines, also known as a style guide. This is a set of rules or guidelines that you can share with colleagues and also third parties such as suppliers, which will help improve the consistency, or rather ensure the consistency of your comms across all channels. Consistency is very important because it helps build trust amongst your prospects and customers, and trust is a critical part of the purchase decision making process. As with most things in life, a good plan is the basis for successful action. Creating a style guide or brand templates for your business is the foundation of better communications for your audiences. It's also really handy for dissemination among staff or working with third parties and suppliers. There's a ton of templates online. If you just Google or Bing or whichever your preferred search engine is, just search for brand guidelines templates. You'll see a ton of options. Have a look through, see what stands out and works for you. There are some key elements which I think you should definitely include, so let's go through those now. So in your brand guidelines, I would suggest you include a mission statement, a section on colours, a section on your logo, on key imagery, typography and tone of voice. Let's go through each one of those in more detail. The first key element I would include in any set of brand guidelines is the company mission statement. This sets out your company values and dictates particularly tone of voice, but also imagery and other things like that. It really is a reflection of the values you hold as a company. It's well worth including this in your brand guidelines because it really does set the tone for all else that follows. So it's worth spending some time deciding on your mission statement, deciding how that will be reflected out into the wider world, and it's worth capturing in the brand guidelines as the kind of keystone for everything else. The second key element to include in your brand guidelines is your colours, your company colours, your brand colours. It's absolutely critical you note these down in formats as required by the channel. So for example, for print you want to capture them in PMS and CMYK, and for online activity you want to establish your RGB and hex values. So if you don't already have a specified brand colours, or you'd like to refresh what you already have, I would recommend you use one of the many colour generators available. I particularly like mycolour.space, which lets you input one key colour and then it will display colour palettes for you to choose from. There are also sites such as Coolers which do a similar thing, but also have libraries of popular colour palettes for inspiration. We could probably do an entire webinar on colours and colour theory, how colours affect mood and decision making, but that's probably a webinar in of itself. For now, just take away that it's really important that you codify your colours, that you choose colours that reflect your values, and that you specify them in your brand guidelines so that third parties and colleagues always use them correctly. The third critical element of a comprehensive brand guidelines is typography or fonts. A good choice of font can really help distinguish and elevate your brand, and conversely a bad choice of font can really damage brand reputation. Say for example you are a bank and you start using Comic Sans on all your communications, then it's quite possible that some of your customers might start questioning the integrity of your brand. So where do you start to look for fonts? A great place to start again is with Google. They have an excellent resource in their Google Fonts. Here you can choose and download fonts to use in your communications. There's a myriad choices available, but you do need to be aware of web-safe fonts. It gets confusing, but essentially not every font is available on everyone's computer. Something to bear in mind. Some marketing channels won't necessarily honour fonts. Email, for example, so email software such as Outlook won't display custom fonts. It'll display Arial or Times New Roman instead. There are a selection of fonts called web-safe fonts, which you can be fairly certain everyone will have on their computer. These would be things like Arial, Times, Courier, but naturally these aren't as distinctive as some of the sexier custom fonts that Google and other font houses have. So go ahead and choose a font you like, but just be conscious of having a fallback for those channels that don't support custom fonts. The next element to consider in your brand guidelines is tone of voice. A very, very, very important one in my opinion. This is how you talk to your customers. These are the words on the page, whether it be in a print ad, in a mobile ad, whatever it may be. This really is a reflection of your values as a business. So go back to your mission statement and consider how it affects how you talk to your customers. Are you trying to be professional? Are you trying to inject a sense of humour? Are you talking as an individual, like a one-to-one conversation with your audience, or are you looking to represent a big brand? The best way to generate your tone of voice is to write down some key phrases, consider them, consider how they'd be received by your audience and how they align with your principles and your mission statement. Think about lots of elements, so things like vocabulary, punctuation, acronyms you might use, certain phrases. Also consider words and phrases that you would never use, so also have a blacklist, and then codify all this into your brand guidelines. Next, let's discuss imagery. So the best way to do this is to have a look at some of the free image sites such as Pexels and Unsplash. These are resources where you can download royalty-free imagery to use in your communications. Pull together a collection of images that you feel represents your brand and your brand's aspirations, and then use these as a guide for communication. So include some example imagery to help indicate to others what kind of images they need to be finding. Also think about whether you're just going to use photography, whether you're going to use drawings and illustrations, or both. And then don't forget to consider all the channels you might use and how your images will appear and also be affected by those channels. For example, in email marketing, you need to have images at a certain size. Web banners, for some of the smaller Google ad spaces, you're going to need to think carefully about the imagery you use. So think about the channels where it's going to be used and also the style of imagery that you want to use to represent your brand. Next up, let's discuss logos. So with your logo, it's really important that you codify it into your brand guidelines. So it specifies its size, its ratio, the colours that exist within it, also how much space it has around it, and where it appears on the page or the screen, if it needs the tagline with it, and so on. Write all these elements down so there's no question of how it should appear on the page. And by page I mean both a physical print page but also a web page or an email or whatever it may be. You should also consider having dark and light versions of your logo. So for example, if you have your logo appearing on a dark image, you want a nice light version so it's visible, and not a dark version where it's just going to blend into the background. The main purpose of this is consistency. So harking back to where we started at the beginning, consistency being really important for not only trust and purchase decision making, but also brand awareness. You want people to recognize your logo wherever they see it and to understand that it's the one and the same logo and one and the same company. As I mentioned before, there's plenty of other things that you can include in your brand guidelines. Have a look at the templates online and see what you might want to include. But having a logo, a mission statement, a tone of voice guide, typography, imagery and color guide, having those all specified will stand you in really good stead. One other thing important to discuss is how you manage the process of your brand guidelines. There are several really good websites online that will host your brand guidelines in a really nice UI. So there's one called Frontify, for example. So nice, easily accessible repository. You can just send colleagues and suppliers the link and they can have a look. Also allows you to keep them up to date, and you know that everyone has the most up-to-date version. Alternatively, you can set up a Google Drive or a Dropbox to host your guidelines and example images and stuff. This is an easy and free way to do it, but bear in mind that you run the risk of people downloading a version that's then not updated, so then perhaps having an out-of-date version. Just something to bear in mind. And lastly, a nice simple way to do it is just to create a PDF, which you can circulate to anyone who needs it. But again, just be aware of out-of-date versions circulating. Thank you for your time today. I do appreciate you joining me. I'm conscious that it's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour through brand guidelines, but hopefully there's some pointers in here that will help point you in the right direction when it comes to researching your own brand guidelines. Just a reminder that BookTik customers do get free access every month to our marketing team for check-ins and advice. So if that's of interest to you, and then please do get in touch with one of our lovely people and see how we can help your business. Thanks again for your time. My name's Nathan, and I will speak to you soon. Thank you.